Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Bill Ottman with me. Bill is the founder of Minds, which is a decentralized, really community that he's creating in the social media platform. And what I think you're going to find throughout his story is when you're passionate about a topic, the how doesn't matter, it's the why that does. And so, Bill, thanks so much for being on today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You betcha. So to just kick off your story, Bill, tell us a little bit about growing up and some of the things that were of interest to you as a young boy.
I grew up in Norwalk, Connecticut on the beach. And what was important to me? I was into kind of normal kid stuff. Like superheroes. I played sports, hockey and lacrosse. Um, Definitely, heavy imagination. I'm not into gaming at all now, but I used to be completely obsessed with, standard stuff, Mario, Sega, all the systems, all the games, NHL. NHL was huge.
Yeah.
What was it, like NHL 90, two or whatever?
Well, did you ever have the 64 with Wayne Gretzky 3D hockey?
Oh yeah, yeah, for
That was a
sure. That's
revolutionary game.
yeah. Those systems were just so brilliant. And now sometimes, like, I'm a musician, so I'll get these recommendations on various apps, but of like these amazing musicians doing like the Mario theme and the Zelda theme, and like it's very underrated back then, but I think now people are starting to appreciate, like, wow, the composition of those games was really just like next level. And that's why the impact has been so monstrous. I mean, if you think about like the Nintendo entrepreneurs, like what a crazy company to have started. Like, I would love to talk to the founders of Nintendo.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, revolutionary, right?
Completely.
So as you get older, not unlike many, you decide, hey, I should probably attend college, and so you pick the University of Vermont. Talk a little bit about why you picked to go to college and what some of the interests were at that point for you.
I UVM is beautiful. It's in Burlington, Vermont. I don't know if you've been to Burlington, but it's amazing. It's like overlooking Lake Champlain. It's just this hillside overlooking the lake, and then mountains all in the background. And just amazing music scene, amazing. It's a really good school. I studied English and music.
Yeah.
Um, I happen to have been a huge Fish fan, so I'm not going to say that didn't influence the decision at all. They did go there, but it's definitely not the only reason. And yeah, I kind of just intuitively felt that that's where I wanted to be, and ended up being the right call. I mean, I loved it.
That's amazing. So while you're there, are there any careers that are starting to stand out to you as things you want to be going into, or are you still just like, once I graduate, I'll figure something out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would think about career a little bit, probably gearing more towards being like a writer or a professor, maybe going deeper into a PhD or something. I, really enjoyed writing and reading, and heavily influenced by a lot of like the beat poets, and, like Kerouac and Ginsberg, and um, that whole crowd, Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, Tom Wolfe. And I was just pretty mesmerized by that whole scene, and was very kind of into the counterculture. I was always involved in protests at UVM. I was leading tent cities all around campus. Like, we successfully got the university to divest from weapons manufacturers.
Wow.
Yeah, like most university portfolios are actually, involved in, like, standard kind of weapons companies, oil companies. And so our whole point was, UVM, you're trying to spit this like kind of green image, meanwhile you're invested in like McDonald's and Walmart. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And it worked. And so we held, before Minds existed, we would hold these events called Gathering of the Minds, which was kind of like a hybrid forum slash festival.
Yeah.
And we would do those in, around the country, and we did them at UVM, and like we did one related to this. We brought in professors, teachers, student government, and like held these huge forums and filmed them, and it was really cool. And so, but we were much more focused on like live physical stuff back then, or I was, at least. And then just eventually I organized music festivals too, at Gathering of the Vibes music festival in Connecticut, which was like infamous, biggest one in Connecticut, like 30,000 people for the weekend,
Yeah.
jamming to like, James Brown, Marley's, like funk, rock, blues, all that stuff. And it was amazing. And actually the owner of that, Ken Hayes, we just helped co-produced a recent event that we did at the Beacon Theater in New York City called the Minds Festival of Ideas. And so that was really cool to work with him again. But I ultimately Minds and Minds.com emerged out of this a similar spirit, like working on dialogue, having hard conversations, and getting stuff done, and doing things in a more ethical, open, transparent way.
Yeah.
So it's definitely connected. Yeah.
Now, to rewind into that college experience and, leading different, I guess, adventures in regards to trying to persuade or maybe change the way things have been done, you're obviously going to ruffle feathers anytime you do that. But you also need to have people that are on mission with you. So talk a little bit about being willing to ruffle feathers, to stand up for what you think is right or what you think is morally right. And then also being able to build a following, because as one person, you need to start having adoption by people.
Yeah. Adoption. Wait, sorry. Can you repeat that? Adoption by people?
Yeah, so, just talking about being a leader, but then also how to have people adopt what idea you're trying to go with, right? As one
Right.
person, you can lead it, but eventually you need people to follow and be, supporting that idea with
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And I think that getting people to respond to stuff and or join a community, or whether it's using an app or even just adopting any idea in general,
you.
is I've learned a lot about that over the years. And I've where I'm at now is much more like a softer touch than I used to be. You definitely can't force people into like repeated behavior patterns. You can kind
Yeah.
of you can you can try, but usually it's not going to stick. And because people need to make their own decisions and come to the information in their own way and own time. So, we have absolutely noticed our thesis for, basically open source, privacy, decentralization, monetization for creators, like all of our initial free speech, all of our initial ideas have completely like blown up. And now there's, in a sense, like honestly, like at the center of a lot of the global conversation. Like, every day you're seeing headlines about censorship or, big tech scandals, and, um, you know, the economy, like, and like the creator economy, even specifically, has become one of the, hottest startup categories. So that's been pretty satisfying. Tons of competition has emerged, and that's also great. So, yeah, I think that it's hard though. I mean, product development is so hard. And you think like, when you're getting started and raising money initially or putting your idea together, you're like, oh, if I only had, you have some like relatively small amount of money in mind. You're like, if I only had that, like I could easily build something that would go global. and
Yeah.
and then you start to grow and you see all of this like technical debt that you had and like things that you weren't doing the right way. You do like, I do think that big tech companies are insanely bloated, but you definitely start to see how real product life cycles work and why it takes so many people to do things at scale.
Yeah. No, that's a phenomenal point. Now, talk about so you were doing this in college and you kind of have this idea of minds, but then in 2015 is really when the online platform takes off, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That was when we first launched the mobile app.
So talk about that. Was that you and a group of people that had a same vision? How did you guys come together and how did you decide to launch at that point?
Um, I mean, it was really just when the app was ready.
Yeah.
It took a long time to plan it out and build it. So, we launched it as soon as we could.
Yeah. Now, you talked about the idea of freedom of speech and differing ideas, and I thought you had a really good comment when you were on Joe Rogan's podcast, and you had made the statement that completely taking a person's opinion out of the conversation, um, as much or as little as you disagree with it, isn't necessarily the way to have open dialogue about opinions. So, talk a little bit about that idea of freedom of speech, not necessarily like hating on people, but willing to say, hey, there's two different sides and we can both, have an educated conversation about those.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that we're living in a world where there's a lot of tribalism. People are very easily triggered by ideas that they disagree with. And, it's sort of understandable. Like there's a lot of bad ideas out there. And so it's easy to let that affect you in a deep way. And I think that people have sort of forgotten um why it's so important to protect people's voices that you disagree with. And that was really the original spirit of how this country came up. And, throughout the 60s and, traditionally like organizations like the ACLU and whatnot have always like understood that you defend like neo-Nazis or KKK members in court to speak because like freedom of speech is like the foundation of free society. You shut down anyone's voice and then uh, literally anybody else's voice can and most likely will get shut down. So you need that universal freedom regardless, as long as it's not illegal or like threatening direct violence and whatnot, then you got to let it go. And now people have all of these excuses, whether it's you know misinformation, propaganda, whatever it is, hate speech, and like these are problems. I'm not
Yes.
there's racists, yeah,
Yep.
we've there have been racists for a long time, um but it's not how you deal with them actually. And like what the research shows, actually, we wrote a paper called the Censorship Effect, co-authored by Daryl Davis, a number of PhDs at Culture Pulse.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw that at all, but we basically, I mean, so Daryl is famous for helping hundreds of members of the KKK leave the KKK.
Yeah.
And he's black. He talks to them, over time, people just figure it out because he doesn't go in there being like, oh, like you're wrong. Like he just literally sits down and listens to them. And
Yeah.
eventually they start to see the humanity. There was a study that came out recently in January about empathy. And it was actually a study that used empathy as a counter speech method to prevent xenophobia on social networks.
Mm.
And basically what they did in the study was they had these interventionists who kind of went on, I think it was Twitter. They went on Twitter and they employed three different tactics. One was empathy, one was comedy, and one was kind of like pushing them to believe something else. And they found pretty overwhelmingly that empathy worked the best in terms of having an impact on the racists.
Mm.
So, which completely backs up our research and what Daryl's done. And so, our whole strategy is that you can't polarize the internet. Like splitting right now, what's happening is the internet's getting split apart between big tech and like alternative platforms. And that's a horrible idea. It's going to cause deeper radicalization and division.
Yeah. So I want to, talk a little bit about a comment you made there, and that was, Daryl had success, talking to people that are part of the KKK and helping them see, maybe the other side of the conversation when he was human and he was present. How do you feel like that impact happens now as we move to a more virtual world? Losing the human touch, right? That face to face interaction. How do you see that changing, or how could somebody, implement that empathy trait that you're talking about from the paper?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, a fair amount of Daryl's stuff has been done face to face, but actually, a huge percentage of it is done digitally.
Mm.
So he has many ongoing conversations with um, these people, whether it's an email, messaging apps, on Minds, and yeah, so it's already been a part of a strategy. So I think that undoubtedly face to face is gonna probably be uh faster, but you
Yeah.
never know. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, it really depends on the individual situation, who you're dealing with, where they're at. Um, I mean, people are crazy. People fall in love on online. People meet on a website and hop on a video call. There's people who like I wouldn't even be surprised if they got married and they had never physically met. Like honestly,
Yeah.
like the world is insane. So,
Yeah.
there's all of this variation in terms of relationships. And it's a real thing. So yeah, digital is real. I think that digital is, you have physical and digital environments, but both are definitely the real world. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of people call the internet, not real life,
Mm.
which, fair enough. It's different, and
Yeah.
it's probably a little bit more shallow, but you cannot undermine a lot of people's experiences. I mean, for some people, they've had their most intimate, impactful in experiences online. And that doesn't necessarily float my boat, and
Yeah.
it's probably, not most people's goal, but it is what it is.
Yes. Now, something that I'd be curious to hear your perspective on is, as you've been, I would say, bucking against the trend, I think a realization that you can have is there are people that are behind me and supporting me. They just didn't know who was going to lead the movement. So once they heard about it, they were ready to jump on board. There are other people that no matter how much time I spend with them, I just may never convert them into thinking the way I do. And then the battleground, if you will, is the people in between, right? That are neither all the way with you or all the way against you. They're just looking for, an argument that could support or that could persuade them into a direction. So, talk about that just in general for anyone that's maybe, trying to gain momentum in an idea or a business or a product that they're
Mm.
using, and knowing, hey, just because one or two people is adamantly against what you're trying to do, it doesn't mean that everyone is that way.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the ultimate test with whatever you're trying to push, let's take an app for instance, or a website that you have.
Yeah.
Um, do you use it?
Mm.
And like I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs who have products that they don't even use
Yeah.
themselves. So, first of all, that I think it's most powerful and kind of provides the most drive to build something that you want to use yourself. I'm not saying that you have to do that. A lot of people come up with great product ideas for stuff that isn't something, maybe it's like a business solution for a business that they don't that
Yeah.
they don't do, and this that can work. But yeah, ultimately, like for me, I judge the health of what we have by like my eagerness to
Mm,
use it. And you really need to look at yourself and, think about human nature a lot, not just like what you think theoretically makes sense, but what you from your own experience know makes sense. And yeah.
that makes perfect sense. Now, as you're developing, minds.com and the app, and you're starting to really launch this, you're up against big competition. Granted, it's 2015, so maybe Instagram isn't as big as it is now, or Twitter's not as big as it is now. But I mean, Facebook is still a behemoth. So talk about entering into that market and how you're helping people realize that you do want to use our app and there is value in using our app.
Yeah, I mean it's really hard. I mean these companies, big tech is so big. They're
Yeah.
not, it's not really like big tech. It's like huge tech. They're ridiculously huge, and they're so deeply embedded in society. It's very different than it was for them. When they were coming onto the scene, and you see pictures of like the Google or Facebook or Twitter homepage from their first versions, and it's so funny, and it's
Yeah.
because it's so just bad. But that's okay. That's a sign of the times. And but the thing is that there wasn't anything. They were the first social networks on the scene.
Yep.
There was nothing else like it, so they didn't have to disrupt social networks. Social networks were the thing that didn't exist, so people were just like, whoa, a social network. Now it's like, social networking engines are in most apps.
Yeah.
If your app doesn't have one, it's like, well, why? I mean, because the architecture wise, it's kind of what you want. I mean, you want like a user system. You probably want like a communication system. You might want those users of your app to interact. I mean, it's a social network,
Yep.
so they're all going to vary in certain ways. But yeah, so for us, it is much harder, and we're not on their level yet. I mean, we're honestly a drop in the bucket. We've got like 6 million users, but that is literally like, I mean, Facebook has like 2 or 3 billion. I mean,
Right.
it's not, it's a scale that's really hard to comprehend. So we need to do things like very differently in order to differentiate. And again, I think that a lot of it just has to do with inverting the model and putting the users first. User ownership is just really where things are going. There's going to be much more sovereign, decentralized systems. And but the thing is that this is all absolutely novel technology. It's all brand new. I mean,
Yep.
you're just starting to see like Twitter and Facebook get into like NFTs, which is it is an important sign that they're paying attention to the space and they know where it's going. So yeah, I mean, we're not there yet. So I can't actually claim to have the answers, quite frankly.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Well, so one thing that kind of reverberates through my mind is there was a documentary I watched on social media, and it talked about how adoption by a new user. It was like if within the first, I think it was the first week, they got like 8 new friends or 8 new follows, whatever it was, they would be significantly higher percentage likely to continue to check in and want to keep using it. Whereas if they didn't get to this random 8 number, it just
Mhm.
wasn't adopted. So for you guys, as you're launching that, what were you guys trying to do to really encourage people to try a new platform? Because it's one thing if I log on to Facebook and I've got 300 friends that are already using it, right? And now I just need to find and add them. Whereas if maybe I'm one of the first people in my friend group and I'm, now joining a network where I don't know as many folks.
Yeah. So we have a system, we have like a whole reward system and token system where basically you earn tokens for your contributions and your engagement. And then one token is worth 1,000 views. So you can use the tokens that you earn to boost your content to more people. And actually, a large number of users have told us that they get better reach on Minds than they do on Facebook and Twitter, which is a cool thing, because it really shows that you don't need to have a billion users in order to be extremely successful. And for a normal person who uses social media, it's actually sort of irrelevant if an app has a billion users. Like, what more so matters is, who do you have access to? Who can you reach? And if their algorithms aren't going to let you reach them, then it is completely irrelevant if they even have the users. So the stickiest thing for us, I think, the boost feature and the tokens, the rewards, but particularly the boost, where you can kind of boost your content, get engagement on it, connect with people, get subscribers, build up a following. That gets into the human nature stuff, because that is what people want. They want engagement. They want their ideas to be heard. They want to learn about new things themselves. So things like making money, being seen, these are like primal things. I mean, this is how all of civilization has kind of been driven.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Tony Robbins has talked about it for years, and before him, many people, right? We have an inherent desire to have a community, to have something that we fit into, right?
Right.
Now, for you in 2018, you guys ended up having a nice fundraising round. And talk a little bit about the business side of things, right? So you launch this app, you're super excited, but you also need revenue to come in to keep to keep things going and to be able to grow and expand it. And so talk about the idea to raise funds and what that was looking like for you guys on the business side.
Yeah. We've done 2 rounds. We did a Series A with Medici Ventures, which is a blockchain focused group. And then we did Series B with Futo, which is a tech freedom organization out of Austin. And, the cool thing about both, but particularly Futo, is that they're definitely mission driven groups. Futo is very focused on open source, sovereign technology, putting power back into people's hands in terms of their computers. And so that's huge. It's not like we have some venture partner that is just like looking for the biggest exit. Obviously we want to have we want to be the most successful business possible and make the most money for everybody. But we're not going to sell out to Facebook. And there would be certain types of partners that would obviously want that.
Right.
There's actually only so many big companies that are even out there making acquisitions, like big acquisitions.
Yeah.
So, which is a huge problem in the tech space in general. It's just like you see that that control of the market just getting dominated. So, it's really hard. We also did an equity crowdfunding round on WeFunder.
Okay.
That was our first round. We did friends and family for a couple of years, and then we did WeFunder. And so we raised $1 million in like a week or two.
That's awesome.
Was huge. And that was like 1,500 of our users invested. We had investments anywhere from like $100 to 100,000.
Wow.
And that was a pretty magical experience. I mean, WeFunder is a great platform. The friction in like traditional venture raises is intense. negotiations are brutal. You're pitching all of these investors, and it's the power dynamic is really brutal. It sucks. And every founder knows that raising money is brutal. The cool thing about WeFunder and crowdfunding platform, equity crowdfunding platforms in general, there's others like Start Engine, and there's a bunch. There's a whole space. It's a rapidly growing space. Um, is that the pitch is the pitch, and people either connect their bank account and invest, or they don't. So like
Yep.
when you show up to an investor meeting when you're crowdfunding, it's very much like, this is what it is, and you can hop on board or not. It's
Yep.
not like, oh, here's our valuation, this is what we want, and then there's all this back and forth endlessly. It's like it's a yes or no, and if it's a yes, it's done in that day.
Yep.
So that is so powerful. Anyone who has a big community, I mean, it's really important to have a community to be able to successfully do it.
Mm.
But like, anyone out there who's trying to start, I have a buddy who started I helped him start a company on through WeFunder. It's called Digifox, which is a finance app, and he has like a really big YouTube following. Is Data Dash on YouTube. He does like crypto analysis, and he has a really big following, and so he like harnessed his following and raised a bunch of money on WeFunder, and he loved the experience. And so it's not to say you can't do it without a community,
Yep.
but even if you don't have a community, the way to be successful in crowdfunding is to find someone with a community that you can partner with. So if you have a company, go find somebody with a huge YouTube or social media following and partner with them. And they're, because you need that distribution for your product anyway. So having creators behind you is absolutely essential, even if you don't do crowdfunding, quite frankly. So yeah, but look, I mean, and then the recent round was like amazing. Aaron saw me on, I was on Timcast IRL, which is a pretty big YouTube show
Yeah.
about news and stuff. And he saw me on there, and we connected, and here we are.
I love it.
Yeah.
Now, as you've been growing, there's this aspect of we're trying to do what's right, but there's also an aspect that it's still a business. It does need to generate revenue. How have you balanced, hey, we're doing what's right, we're doing what we want for the community, and at the same time, the people that have invested in us see where this could lead and, the possible, business growth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so we have a few revenue products. We've got Minds Plus, which is a membership where you get, it's a recurring membership, you get access to bonus features, and we run a rev share program through there. So there is this exclusive feed of content which only Minds Plus users have access to, but they also have the exclusive ability to post content into that feed.
Mm.
And if their content gains, is popular in the Minds Plus library, then they get a payout at the end of the month. So it's pretty cool. I think it's been pretty successful. I mean, we've had a couple thousand members, and that is starting to gain momentum. We also have like a whole array of crypto tools, and we're going to be launching a new monetization feature, which maybe we can work together on the launch. I'll let you know about it, so we can give you a first look. But basically, it's around the idea of getting creators paid for creating content. And so we take a fee on volume going through the network, and so that's another stream. And yeah, we're just trying to find product market fit in these different options, and it's not easy, but we're making some progress, and yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure there's this tough balance of kind of like you were mentioning earlier, this selling out versus continue to grow what you're believing in, right? Because there are plenty of investors that just want to invest into something to sell it to Facebook or just sell it to someone else. But there's probably a lot of creators that are like, I'm not really that passionate about the project. Maybe I just want to get it to a big enough spot where I could sell it and get my big exit. Talk about that for you and your team and really the passion behind it versus just the dollar amount. Not that the dollar amount is not important.
Yeah, I mean, it's very foreign to me, this whole idea of, building something purely for those intentions. It's just not, I'm not saying it's something I would never do, but it's, in terms of what I'm going to dedicate my life to, yeah, that's not really in my universe, doing things like that.
Yeah.
But I can't say that, it all depends on your story. Like, if you're out of school and you come across an opportunity, it may not be your passion, it may not even be something you necessarily agree with, but you know you survive off of doing it, and it makes you independent,
Yeah.
and you kind of go down that road. And I can't discount that. Like, I was watching for like the 10th time The Big Short the other
Yeah.
day, and like, I love that movie. It's one of my favorite movies. And, just this whole idea of, betting against the market, and, even just like short selling in general is like just an interesting phenomenon, and how you can make billions of dollars betting on, the collapse of the housing market, where, and even, to a certain degree, what happens with the short momentum is that, sometimes short markets can actually cause collapses,
Correct.
because then all the investors are actually pulling capital in that direction, which does influence markets. I don't really think that was the case with the 2008 collapse. Like,
Yeah.
it was happening no matter what. So,
Yep.
you know I don't blame them. I think I would love to meet them all, to be honest. Like, people like Michael Burry, and I don't know the guy that Steve Carell played, but it's just such an awesome story.
Yes. Now, I think about this in any, business owner, entrepreneur's world. You think of, gosh, if we could have 100,000 users, like how cool would 100,000 be? And then you get to the first million. Now you're at 6 million. Talk about some of those, moments in the business where you started to feel like, all right, we're gaining momentum and we really, have an idea that's growing in influence.
It was pretty much right away after we launched the mobile app, like, which I think is a rare situation.
Yeah.
We saw like 500,000 users within like the first month,
Wow.
which, yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty rare. Like, some big I think like we got a bunch of attention because some anonymous accounts kind of liked what we were doing with privacy, and then that picked up a lot of steam in the press. And so we had all these people, that was during the whole Snowden
Yeah.
revelation times. So like, a lot of people were thinking about privacy, and it was euphoric. I mean, getting all these people, and they were using the point system, and it was just like, it was wild. And so, but it was intentional also. I mean, that is what we were going after. It's what we wanted to happen, and it did. And we did have a pretty big social following going into that as well. So, I think that if you if you like test the idea on yourself, and if it works on you, and you're a savvy kind of person of, in that realm, like, it should work. It does but a lot of times it doesn't. But it's really hard to build good apps. I mean, it's getting better, it's getting easier for developers, but keeping up with these behemoth companies is really brutal. Not to mention, we make it harder for ourselves because we're only willing to use open source
Mm.
software. So, like what a lot of apps will do is just kind of puzzle together proprietary packages. And so like, and a live streaming app. I
Yeah.
mean, you could have one live streaming app that feels super slick. It, but it's not even their live streaming software that they're using. They just license something. And honestly, a lot of the industry does stuff like that. And or they just use Google Analytics and they use all these Google services. And so it's really just like a Google product, like reskinned. And but sometimes, that works. But it's not the world that we really want to live in. So, I mean, you can literally save years of time by taking those shortcuts, and you can build profitable businesses that way. But what are you? Like you
Yeah.
are just, you're just a Google company. And so that's just not the path that we wanted to take. So we have built everything ourselves. And it's hard. It's hard when you kind of have these principles, and those principles are in a sense at odds with like the most convenient technology. So, but over time that's changing, and I think that open source is really starting to take over, but not yet. So it's a little bit frustrating, because we'll see these competitors, like other alternative social networks, that do that, and
Yeah.
they sort of call themselves alternative, and they call themselves they claim to care about these principles, but in practice under the hood they really don't. So
Yeah.
but that's okay, you
So,
got to deal with that.
so I want you to talk a little bit about that. I think, as a general population, we just see this notice that pops up and it says, you have to accept this, otherwise you can't continue to use this app, right? Like, well, I want to keep using Facebook, so yeah, I'll sign it, whatever. I don't know what I just signed, but I will sign it. And something that
Mm-hmm.
stood out to me about your platform is we're not tracking your conversations, and we don't have access to your conversations, and we have an
Right.
open sourcing. So for the listener that says, Bill, I don't even know why that matters. Like, why is open sourcing important? Why is you not being able to see my conversations inherently important? Talk a little bit about that and why that truly is important and how that differentiates you from the megas.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately is just, it's a security thing for users, security thing for us. Like, if we don't want to have information to even hand over to the government if the government comes to us. So
Yeah.
luckily there are ways to do that. If you just use end-to-end encryption, it's completely impossible for us to even compromise your privacy. So um corporations can be really dangerous, and they can get away from the founders, and they can go in unpredictable directions. And so you don't, regardless of like my beliefs, something could happen to me.
Mm.
And I want to make sure that our company is built in a way that, it's not to say that that could never be changed, but it's definitely much harder to change if you implement this kind of stuff early on.
Yes, absolutely. Now, additionally, I think the idea of tokens and being able to, gain a token for your feeding into the community, but that then gives you this inherent benefit of more opportunity or more viewership. Talk a little bit about how that works for you guys and what someone's doing on the platform to gain a token.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just getting engagement on your content, getting people subscribing to you, getting people voting you up, and then also we reward people for just setting up their crypto wallet and holding tokens. And then we also have this tool called ad mining, where you basically stake into Uniswap, and then so based on your share of the Uniswap pool, we give you more promotion on the app, and you can earn more tokens that way. And people can tip you as well. So there's a whole tipping function. and we run contests, and we've run contests for like making memes, and like we run all these different kind of programs with different ways to earn tokens. And yeah, we're about to, I mentioned earlier, roll out a whole new way, and so we're constantly iterating on that. And yeah, so it's crypto is tricky because it is where we feel things are going, but at the same time, a lot of people are not really there yet in terms of like understanding it, or even having a desire to understand it. So we do have a nice system where you don't really have to know anything to start earning. You just sort of start earning, and then you can set up the actual crypto wallet if you want to. But yeah, I think that over time people are gonna see the value more. And I mean, the whole space is growing drastically. Like the fact that the whole economy is tanking right now, so we're kind of seeing this correction. But I don't really think that is telling of. I don't think that's a jab at crypto. All markets are getting hammered.
Yeah. Well, and, a lot of people that are very knowledgeable and educated in that space actually think it's kind of a good thing, because it sorts out some of those weak projects that were just there to get the easy money because things were hot. Right. And this is going to bring the projects that really have a future to the forefront.
Right.
Now, in 2019, you go on Joe Rogan's podcast, which has to be a great and cool experience. But you talk about so many different ideas, and he has such a big presence and following. Talk about how getting that exposure can help your brand, and not only your brand but also Minds.com and what you're doing there.
Oh yeah, that was absolutely epic. And I mean, people just want reality. I mean, they don't want to be fucked around with. They don't. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on the
You're
show.
good.
You can bleep it if you want.
No, you're good.
But I think that's what Joe proves. I mean, people don't want to deal with BS. They don't want to be pitched to. They don't want like cheesiness. They just want real conversation. And marketing now is so, I mean, at the end of the day, all that was just a conversation with me and Joe. Like mine's was like, I talked about it, but it wasn't like my main mission of going. Like
Yep.
ultimately ultimately my goal is to just have a good conversation. And I think it was, and luckily I got to go back earlier this year. And it if you look at a lot of like guerrilla marketing programs now, and like how memes work, and how like, even on Twitter, you'll see like huge corporate brands now taking this much more like real, uncensored tone. And you see like Wendy's and like Burger King like chirping back and forth at each other, and like making fun of each other on Twitter. And like
Yeah.
that is, I love that. I think that is where I want the world to go. It's like all of this synthetic corporate nonsense is just, it sucks. I mean, it's one of the things that makes corporate life horrible, is just this like kind of fake smile that people put on, and like just overthinking, like being worried about keeping up that like super clean image. Like it's not to say like that you don't have to be, I don't know, there's a balance to strike with it, because obviously it's not just constant, it's not all about just making fun of each other nonstop on Twitter. Like that can't be your whole marketing strategy.
Yeah.
But the willingness to do that once in a while and just be more playful is, you're just seeing this kind of thing take over advertising. Like advertising is not, it's all about authentic content. And people can sniff out fakeness so easily now. So
Yeah.
I think, and I think Joe really like was a breakthrough figure in normalizing just not caring about that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bill, any other pivotal moments that you'd really like to highlight in this journey that you've been on so far, or anything that really stands out that's been, helpful in the growth and where you're at now?
Sorry, you cut out. Say that one more time.
Sorry. Yeah, any other pivotal moments you'd like to highlight in your story that have helped you get to where you're at now?
Um, I've been at this for a long time. I mean, it's been like a decade.
Yeah.
And so it's not about small moments for me.
Yeah.
It's just been, you know, most of my life, most of my working life. And so it's that sustained effort and attention that I think has gotten us to where we are. You know, over time, you're going to have like, yes, I could name like a handful of other like big events where we saw like huge surges of growth, and those happen, you know, maybe like once every 6 months or something. But that is only happening because of the focused energy.
Mm.
So, um, you know, I think that at the end of the day, it's just about finding the thing that you can tolerate and um, justify and justify and kind of be inspired by for your life. So, you know, don't like it. Yeah, like crafting a company is all about that. Unless you kind of want to, you know, unless you're doing a short term like exit thing. I'm not saying that can't be done. Everything takes so much longer than you think it's going to take, though.
Yeah.
So, you know, you might think, oh, I'll just do this for 6 months and like have a quick turnaround. You know, go for it. But the chances of it actually happening like that are extremely rare. So I don't. It's not really worth the risk to me. But because what I'm doing is already like extremely risky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love it. Well, Bill, I want to say thanks so much for coming on today and sharing your story and how you've gotten to where you're at and all the amazing things you're doing in your space. So people, call to action would be go and check out Minds, right? I mean, first and foremost. So where can they get included there?
Yeah. You know, you can get it on the app stores. You can go to minds.com, minds.com. You can find me at minds.com/Ottman, Ottman. And yeah, you know, hit me up. Like, I try to be accessible. Um, that's about it. Like, would love to have you and any of your listeners on the app. Like, it would be great to follow up. We'll get your show up, blasting out on there, and I'll be curious. I'll be curious to hear from you, like to kind of test this experience we've had where, you know, noticing creators actually getting more reach on Minds than like Twitter, for
Yeah.
instance. So I would love to, you know, that's one of my favorite metrics because yeah, it's just like you can make people, these big networks are so big and people like worship them, but a lot of people struggle really hard to grow. I mean, look, you're a creator, like it seems like you've had like good success on iTunes. I don't know like what other platforms um have been like your favorites or you feel like have worked the best, but it's you know, yeah, because it's very hit or miss.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it kind of comes back to something we talked about earlier. I think it's easiest to go to these big platforms because you know people that are on there. But to your point, it doesn't always mean it's the best for your actual content. There could be a lot of other ways that getting your
Right.
content is going to be more beneficial.
Yeah, it's like, what are your goals? If your goals are to get the word out about the thing that you're doing, like it's not necessarily about going to those networks. Like maybe, like, yeah, be there.
Yep.
try them all. And yeah, I mean, the benefit of a place like Facebook or Instagram is that, like, okay, all your friends are there, you
Yep.
know, and that is a unique thing which has its use case. But the algorithms are just getting worse and worse every day. And so when it comes to meeting new people, getting exposure to new people, it's definitely not the case that these apps are going to be working in your best interest. In fact, the opposite. Like they end up having more of a vested interest in keeping their biggest users happy, as opposed to helping up and comers. Though, I don't want to speak too soon, because the thing is that we don't know. We don't know
Right.
what we don't know what their algorithms are doing, and they're never going to show us. So you can't trust them at the end of the day either way. So even if they do happen to help out a small creator once in a while,
Yep.
that's sort of up in the air.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I even think the surge of TikTok proved that, right?
Yeah.
In 2020, a relatively small, app all of a sudden is the preferred place for a lot of people. And you see, man, on Instagram, maybe they have 10,000 people, but on TikTok, they've been able to grow this, multi $100,000 million following. And that's just because of the way the platform was designed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think TikTok proves a really important point, even though it's sort of like the epitome of a like surveillance app. And, it's literally like a
Right.
Chinese backed surveillance nightmare.
Yeah.
But it it is a beautifully designed app, and those people really do know what they're doing. And the fact that they were able to gain the growth, the exponential growth that they did, is it's actually a good sign for anyone out there who is trying to grow one, because guess what, it proves that it's not impossible. Like,
Yeah.
you can beat that. Like, their growth was so fast. I think they came out of nowhere in the period of like a year.
Yeah.
Oops.
That's exactly right.
So yeah, it's a bit of a paradox, their story, because they're like worse than big tech. They're among the worst, but they're the new kid on the block. And the fact that a new player can come that quick, that should give other people hope. It does give me hope. I think that similar thing happened with like Pokemon Go. Like, Pokemon Go is not that
Yeah.
big anymore, but like they got, even in the period of months, they got like hundreds of millions of users. So
Yeah.
this type of phenomenon is totally possible. And that's just what is amazing about the internet. Like, the fact that a piece of technology can spread at that rate it's very rare that it
Yes.
happens, but it happens.
It happens.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Bill, thanks again so much. Everyone, go check out Minds in the App Store or minds.com. And we'll look forward to following up with you soon, Bill. I want to wish you nothing but the best, my man, and excited to see where you go. And can't wait to have this conversation again few years down the road and see where everything's grown to.
Yeah, let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much, Phil.